In recent years, the United States has become a battleground of ideologies, values, and beliefs that seem irreconcilable. Political divisions, which once merely simmered beneath the surface, have now boiled over into all aspects of society. The divide is not only visible on the streets, in debates at dinner tables, and on social media timelines, but it is also embedded within the very fabric of American life, fracturing our national identity. While polarization can arise in any political climate, the political strain of extremism championed by today's Republican Party represents an existential threat to the nation's unity and democracy. Historically, conservatism in America stood for small government, fiscal responsibility, and traditional values. It was an ideology with principles that guided discourse within a reasonable spectrum. The key word here is reasonable. Well, there have always been sharp disagreements between Republicans and Democrats. There was at least a shared reality, a shared understanding of facts, and an implicit agreement on democratic norms. However, the Republican Party of the 21st century has undergone a radical transformation. No longer simply a conservative party, it has been co-opted by a movement characterized by reactionary politics, conspiracy theories, authoritarian tendencies, and a blatant disregard for democratic norms. The Tea Party movement of the late 2000s set the stage for this shift. But the rise of Donald Trump as a de facto leader of the Republican Party in 2016 cemented its new direction. Trump's administration ushered in a wave of populist far-right policies that pandered to white grievances and cultural fears. Yet Trump is not the root cause. He is merely a symptom of a deeper sickness. The GOP's embrace of far-right populism and conspiracy theories, the use of voter suppression, and the demonization of the political opposition have created a feedback loop of radicalization. The seeds sown by far-right media outlets like Fox News and conspiracy theorists on social media have grown into a full-blown political ideology, a far cry from the conservative principles of the past. One of the most insidious elements of today's Republican extremism is its ability to construct an alternative reality. Through its leaders and media mouthpieces, the party has successfully convinced millions of Americans to reject basic facts in favor of, quote-unquote, alternative facts. This trend is mostly vividly seen in the denial of the 2020 election results, where the big lie about a stolen election has become gospel for many within the Republican base. This lie, perpetuated by elected officials, former President Trump, and media outlets, not only delegitimizes the current administration, but also erodes the very foundation of democracy, free and fair elections. But the narrative of falsehoods doesn't stop at the election. Republicans have continually denied the reality of systemic racism, climate change, and even the severity or existence of COVID-19. When basic truths are called into question and every inconvenient fact is labeled fake news, the social contract breaks down. There's no shared foundation of truth upon which to build compromise or consensus. This manufactured reality has created a nation living in two parallel worlds, one grounded in facts, science, and reality, and another in which facts are malleable and reality is dictated by ideology. In this bifurcated nation, unity and progress are all but impossible. Political discourse becomes a zero-sum game, with each side talking past one another, entrenched in their own set of facts. Republican leadership has also embraced a strategy of stoking culture wars to distract and divide. By framing the left as the embodiment of woke ideology and cancel culture, the GOP has effectively convinced their base that any calls for social justice or reform are attacks on American values. This narrative has turned empathy into a threat and progress into a radical agenda. In reality, these so-called culture wars are thinly veiled attempts to mobilize anger and resentment against marginalized communities. The demonization of immigrants, the relentless attacks on transgender rights, and the refusal to acknowledge systemic racism are all tactics to create an us versus them mentality. This polarization is deliberate and serves to galvanize voters through fear and hatred. What's particularly dangerous is the GOP's strategic targeting of education and history. Attempts to censor discussions on race, gender, and history in schools are part of a broader agenda to rewrite reality and instill a revisionist narrative. These efforts, under the guise of protecting children from indoctrination, aim to eliminate critical thought and whitewash the complexities of American history. This isn't just an educational issue. It's a broader effort to control the national narrative and solidify a reactionary vision of America. Perhaps the most alarming aspect of Republican extremism is the overt attempt to erode democratic institutions. From state-level voter suppression laws to blatant gerrymandering, the GOP has systemically attacked voting rights. Republican lawmakers in states like Georgia, Texas, and Florida have enacted laws designed to make it more difficult for Black and minority communities to simply vote. But this assault on democracy goes beyond restrictive voting laws. The party has also normalized the idea that a violent resistance is a legitimate response to losing an election. January 6, 2021 was not an isolated incident. It was a culmination of years of rhetoric delegitimizing the opposition, demonizing dissent, and outright glorifying violence. The insurrection at the Capitol was an explicit rejection of democracy, fueled by lies and incendiary language from Republican leaders. Despite the stark reality of that day, the GOP has largely chosen to downplay or outright deny the significance of the attack. By refusing to hold insurrectionists accountable and continuing to support those who perpetuated the big lie, the Republican Party has tacitly endorsed political violence across our nation. The Republican Party has increasingly become less about policy and more about loyalty to a personality. Trump's rise shifted the GOP from a party focused on policy debates to one obsessed with personal loyalty and cultural grievances. The transformation has been so stark that many Republican lawmakers now fear primary challenges from within their own party if they deviate from Trump's messaging or refuse to spread his baseless and false claims. The lack of substantive policy discussions in the GOP is quite telling. During the 2020 election cycle, the party didn't even release a platform, an unprecedented move that revealed their transition from a policy-driven party to a movement focused solely on maintaining power at any and all cost. This trend signals a dangerous departure from democratic norms, in which adherence to a cult of personality and ideological purity outweighs governance and public and societal welfare. The consequences of this political strategy are becoming more visible every single day. Americans are losing trust not just in their government, but in each other. Friends and family are severing ties over political disagreements, while communities become divided along ideological lines. This is more than political polarization. It is a rupture in the social fabric of our nation. The Republican Party's extremist agenda, built on an embrace of falsehoods, authoritarian tactics, and culture wars, is eroding the foundation of American democracy. What we face is not a mere political disagreement, but an existential crisis. The destruction of shared facts and values undermines the possibility of compromise and prevents any meaningful progress. It leaves us in a perpetual state of anger and division, tearing the country apart from within. The solution to this crisis is neither simple nor immediate. It requires courage from leaders on both sides of the aisle to speak truth to power, a renewed commitment to democratic norms, and a willingness to confront the dangerous rhetoric that has taken hold of American politics. But the responsibility doesn't just lie with politicians. It falls on all of us to reject the lies, refuse the culture wars, and seek out the truth in the sea of disinformation. American politics has always been contentious, but the stakes are higher now than ever before. The future of our nation depends on whether we can resist the allure of authoritarianism, reclaim the value of truth, and rebuild a shared sense of purpose and community. But first, we must acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that the extremism of the Republican Party is not just a political problem, it is a national crisis. And if left unchecked, it will continue to rip the country apart, not just along ideological lines, but at the very heart of what it means to be American. The choice before us is a stark division or unity, authoritarianism or democracy, collapse or renewal. The time to choose is right now. For today's show, we've invited back David Shaw, author of the book Deplorable Politics, Propaganda for the Brainwash, to talk about the direction of the current Republican Party, and more specifically, the misdirection of presidential candidate Donald Trump. And David Shaw will join us right after the break. We'll be right back. David Shaw holds a BA in political science and a master's degree with a psychotherapy major. He worked for 45 years as a program development consultant, serving in social service, mental health, and healthcare organizations, but is now retired and dedicates his spare time to a very important principle: defending democracy. Last season, David visited Coup Save America to tell us how propaganda is used to polarize opinions. And today we are delighted to have him back on the show with an update on deplorable politics. Has our nation's situation improved in the last year? I don't know. Let's bring David on to find out. And David joins us right now.
Hello,
Sean. Sir.
It's great to see you again. Thank you so much for having me back.
It's a great pleasure, believe me. Big fan of your book. So I wanted to ask you, how have things improved since we last spoke?
First of all, Sean, I want to again just say how impressed I am with your preparation and that introduction that really is a fantastic summary of my book. And I'm so grateful that you're having me back.
It's a great pleasure. And I just want to once again promote the book, Deplorable Politics, Propaganda for the Brainwashed. It's available on Amazon, and it's available elsewhere too, is it not?
I think it's available just about everywhere.
Perfect. And you can go to deplorablepolitics.org to learn more about the book and to find the book wherever you purchase books, whether it's Amazon or Apple Books or what have you. So we have an election coming up, and it's looking very much like Donald Trump is going to, unfortunately, win the election. What are your views on this? And can you explain what's happening in American politics that has brought us to this point?
Well, when I first wrote my book and we first talked about it, I remember that I wanted to get it published right away because I wanted it to be topical, and who knows what would happen a year or later. And it turns out that my book is more relevant today than the day I wrote it. The things that I were worried about and the issues that I raised are the exact issues and the crisis that we're now facing. In terms of what's different, I just think that the stakes are a lot higher. I thought that after the Democratic convention, which was very inspiring, we would see a big boost for Kamala. That didn't materialize. After the debates between Trump and Kamala, I thought we'd see a boost that would put her ahead, so we could feel a little comfortable that Trump is not going to win. That didn't materialize. When he said such unhinged things about the Haitian immigrants are eating the dogs and cats of, I thought, well, people got to know that he's completely deranged now. And since then, I think his numbers have actually improved.
Yes.
So to me, that just demonstrates the incredible power of propaganda and its ability to brainwash people into ignoring reality.
How would you define, you talk about Donald Trump in terms of malignant narcissism. And I'm wondering what sets it apart from other psychological conditions like dementia, for instance?
It's basically, his idea that he's a genius, the smartest person in the world, that he has
stable genius.
The answers. He has the answers to everything. Only one person can do it. That's him. And no matter who the group is that he's talking to, he just promises, elect me and all your problems will be solved. And at the same time, actually criminalizes his opposition, and he says that he's going to go after them with the military, and
yes.
They're going to be investigated. All of that is symptomatic of malignant narcissism, as well as compulsive lying. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, from a psychological perspective, is he delusional? He thinks what he's saying is true? Or is he just a liar? He knows he's a liar, and he just believes lying is effective, and that's why he does it. After looking at this and going back and forth, I think the latest evidence that came out from Jack Smith in his prosecution of Trump's crimes during January 6th, there was a lot of people that told him that he lost the election. And there's plenty of evidence that says, I don't care if I lost, just lie, say that I'm going to say that I won anyway. So that kind of pretty much dispelled the idea that he's delusional. He does have some really neurotic qualities, which is best summed up as malignant narcissism. But he is also very aware that when he says that he did not lose the election, that it was stolen from him, that's just a flat out lie.
Yeah. No, he definitely has. Well, let me ask you. His lies, at least to most people, are obvious lies. Yet his followers, do they actually? How do we explain? I don't even know how to put this into words because it's so mystifying to me. Do his supporters know that he's a liar, or do they actually believe everything that he says?
Well, obviously, they don't have a really critical mindset. Their followers, they are committed more emotionally to Trump than analytically. They don't really, they're not interested in what he has to say as much as the feelings and emotions that he evokes. So those people who have this character of being angry, resentful, there's a large population that just says, I'm disgusted with politics. The Republicans and the Democrats are both don't represent the people. When they have that attitude, then they think that, well, Trump's bad, but the other side's bad too. Trump does all these bad things, but the other side, they're have their own faults, although they don't really go into what those faults are. So it's more of a belief that Trump can save us, that Trump is the answer. A lot of people I mentioned in my book, Christians are a lot of conservative, especially white people who are Christians, have, of course, faith in God, that God is, their prayers will be answered. And they transfer that kind of belief into a person like Trump, who they want to believe is all powerful and will solve all their problems.
To be fair, Trump does seem to be all powerful. He has escaped every bit of accountability for his crimes. I mean, he seems really like, they call him Teflon Don, and he really does seem to be untouchable. Does that play into this whole ideological perspective?
There's no doubt about it. And, I think that the Democrats also allow that to happen. The fact that it takes 4 years to even get close to a trial, and only one trial has happened before the election, and even then we can't, he's been convicted, he's guilty, he's a felon, but he hasn't been sentenced. So they even got that delayed until after the election.
Well, during his presidency, he has completely reshaped the federal judiciary. I mean, not just the Supreme Court, but the federal courts across the nation. And that, I think, is playing a huge role in all of this as well. I mean, he has really captured the state's courts, the nation's courts, I should say.
Yes, and that's just the beginning. That's scratching the surface. His whole thing about investigating his political enemies, mass immigration, something I want to talk about that is almost unbelievable. His calling his opponents the enemy within.
Again, yes.
He is going, and the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. This is really, really dangerous. Anybody who thinks he won't abuse power just hasn't been paying attention.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Democratic Party for a moment. Because in my opinion, they have failed. I mean, there's a lot of truth to the statement that neither party really represents the people. They represent the corporations that they serve. And I see that as a huge problem. One of the things that I criticize Kamala Harris for instance, is like associating herself with people like Liz and Dick Cheney, who are both very unpopular figures, far right-wingers. Shouldn't Kamala Harris be addressing a more progressive agenda?
Well, yeah, there's a long history of that. That's why, not too long ago, the working class, the middle class population were Democrats.
Yes.
But the elected representatives in Congress really didn't speak to that large population. Instead, they spoke to a lot of smaller identity groups, whether it be gays, racial groups, a whole variety, educational level, a whole variety of different subgroups, rather than the larger group of low-income and middle-class Americans that were traditionally guaranteed Democrats an effective ruling majority. But because they didn't really respond to that larger group, Democrats or Republicans have been able to recruit those people into their party.
How much of it is, well, let me ask you, and you may not know the answer to this, but it seems like so much of the Republican Party's agenda is based on a doctrine of hatred of the others, othering. When did that really start? Did that start during the Reagan era, or did that start even before then?
Well, you could go back to McCarthy and his anti-communist crusade, but the really more sophisticated propaganda started with Reagan. And instead of talking about issues that would help the American people, they changed the narrative to family values.
Right.
And it became a discussion of whether or not you support family values, vote for me. And so issues of the economy or foreign policy or anything else took second priority to that. And it's just been a more sophisticated and nuanced approach, but still the same theme.
Well, I mean, abortion is a big issue right now in the country. And I think that in the Christian right, there's a lot of people that find Trump deplorable, but they agree with his policies on abortion, transgender rights, or the denial of transgender rights, I should say. How big of a group are we talking about when we talk about the Christian right?
It's a very small group, but the Republicans blow it up into a large group. Like they love to complain about taxpayer money being spent on transgender people in prison. They spent $22 million complaining about that in advertising and distracting people from issues and policies that affect the entire population.
Yeah. Well, I believe I just saw a headline today that Trump has spent somewhere around $30 million in ads just on anti-transgender issues.
Yes. Well, all of the ads that Trump puts out, the big difference between Republicans and Democrats is these days Republicans believe that we win when somebody else loses. And Democrats believe we win when everybody works together.
Right. In your book, you say, and I've got a quote here: "Democracy is not about who wins the battle of competing ideas, fought primarily on the field of competing slogans. Democracy is a realization of the best interests of society, as expressed by people's vote. When Republicans rely on propaganda, corporate donations, and voter suppression as their primary political strategy for influencing the electorate's will, democracy is at risk." Now, Democrats do a lot of that as well. I mean, they rely on corporate donors. They've been involved in gerrymandering as well, various forms of voter suppression. How do you distinguish the two parties in that regard?
I would say the biggest factor to distinguish between both parties is Republicans believe it's okay to lie if it'll help you reach your goal. You don't see intentional, blatant lying by Democrats. They use political rhetoric. They color things in order to support their position, but to come up and to lie and demonize the other party, that's not what Democrats do.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest threat day one if Donald Trump is elected? What do you foresee happening?
Well, I think that the number one thing, if you listen to Donald Trump, is to deport all of the immigrants, all the illegal immigrants. And, I think the Democrats really failed to visualize what that policy would look like.
Right.
What's he going to do to deport all these people? Well, he'll go down to all the restaurants and arrest all the bus boys and the dishwashers. He'll go all to the car washes. He will knock on the doors of the rich, and when a Latina or Latino opens the door, they're going to ask for their papers. You know, your landscaper, your roof repair, you know, all these jobs that illegal immigrants have are all going to disappear, and you're going to put these people where and in what conditions, and you know, the whole thing is completely ludicrous. The only analogy, it would be the way that Germany rounded up all the Jews and sent them to concentration camps. That is what that policy would look like. But we don't hear the Democrats really addressing how dangerous and disastrous and incredibly naive that kind of policy is.
Do you think, I had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and he believed that the institutions will hold, that if Donald Trump is reelected, the core institutions of our nation will somehow act as guardrails. No, I totally disagree with that. What do you say to that, to someone who says that?
I would say they really don't understand the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. I mean, and do they believe that with this immunity ruling from the Supreme Court that Donald Trump will have any self-control, that he won't implement the terrible policies that he's advocating?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, we're approaching very scary times, and I still don't understand how we got to this point, because Donald Trump, I mean, you know, he's a philanderer, he's an adulterer, he's a felon, he's a pathological liar, he's clearly unhinged in almost every regard, and yet we have an election that's so close. And I mean, right now, Kamala Harris is falling behind. On the national level, she needs to be at least 5 points ahead in order to win the Electoral College. And that's just not where we are right now. Donald Trump has even gained support among Black voters and minorities that, well, and as you mentioned earlier, even among the middle class, the working class.
Yeah.
How do we rationalize this so that we can understand what is happening?
Very simple. I wrote a book about it, and what has happened in America is propaganda has brainwashed millions of people. The steady stream of lies, social media that only gives people information and opinions that they want to hear, our national press, who until real recently avoided using the word lie in a headline.
Yes.
We have these incredibly uninformative words of disinformation and misinformation. I guarantee you 95% of the people couldn't tell you the difference. And I see all the time, I read articles in newspapers, they don't even use those words right. But if we had headlines that says, in the latest rally, Trump told 40 lies, and here they are, and list them. That actually, CNN just published an article like that. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've noticed, and I read all of the news, I've noticed a major shift from CNN and other news outlets. They're putting the word lie in the headline. Before Kamala was nominated, the news media was on a crusade to talk about Biden's age and dementia. Trump's age and cognitive impairment are far, far worse than Biden's. And we didn't really get the same kind of daily coverage of Trump that we got with Biden. But in the last 2 weeks, I think the media has finally decided maybe we should come out and be more direct about the danger that Trump is, because now all of a sudden I'm seeing all kinds of articles about how unhinged he is, how his acing the cognitive test was a joke.
Right.
The word lie and liar in headlines and in the story, and having videos that show his incoherent speech. Hopefully it's not too little too late, but we need the most important thing is to saturate the media with the message that Trump is dangerous and we can't allow him to be president.
Shouldn't that be fairly obvious, though, how dangerous he is? I mean, we barely survived 4 years of his presidency once. Millions and millions of people ended up dead as a result of his response or inadequate response to the COVID pandemic. How have we gone from rejecting him at the polls once and electing Joe Biden to once again having him lead in the polls?
Propaganda and corporate news is the biggest influence that I think of. Take COVID. How many times have you read or seen that America has 5% of the population of the planet, and they had 20% of the COVID deaths? And that's despite we had the best vaccines, the earliest vaccines, the best treatments. None of that can be attributed to data reporting flaws. It's because Trump mismanaged the COVID crisis, and Democrats really don't hold him accountable for that. You know, Trump comes up with a ridiculous economic theory that every credible economist debunks, and the media really doesn't point that out. You know, these things that matter most to people, Trump is able to, you know, generate anger and resentment, and Democrats are not able to speak the truth about what really happens. Another example is the economy. Well, I talked about the tariffs being a ridiculous answer, but you know, presidents do not determine whether the economy is good or bad, going up and down. The economy goes in cycles. It's never all good or all bad. You know, and nobody can predict precisely those cycles. One thing that we can predict is that during the COVID crisis, rightly so, we just gave everybody a stimulus check to keep the economy afloat and avoid recession, but that didn't come without a cost. And the cost was inflation. And inflation, you know, just started after, you know, everybody started spending this money. And prices went up because there was all this money poured into the economy. Inflation was predictable. I mean, it was a certainty. And to say, well, Trump had the great economy and Biden is responsible for the inflation, that's absurd. You know, actually, the Federal Reserve has a lot more influence on inflation and unemployment than any president. But the media gives this false narrative that under Trump, the economy was good, and under Biden, the economy was bad. You know, that's just not even near what the narrative should be, and have any semblance of fact-based discussion.
Yeah. I want to talk about the another threat. Donald Trump has recently, and CNN just published an amazing article today on this, where Trump is threatening the broadcasting licenses of opposition news, as he calls it. Specifically, he's targeted CBS for their 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. And his quote was, "It's so bad they should lose their license and they should take 60 Minutes off the air." And this is what he said to right-wing podcaster Bongino, thank you, last week. This is another example of a threat to democracy, where he's not only going after his political opponents, but he's going after the media itself.
Yeah, well, if you can silence the media, you've won the game.
Do you think it's fair to equate Donald Trump with someone like Hitler?
I don't know how you can avoid the analogy. And I see posts I used to post the similarities all the time, but I just don't want to have to keep repeating myself. But it's so obvious. I mean, anybody who pays the least amount of attention to history could see the similarities. Trump even borrows the exact words of Hitler, calling people vermin and poisoning the blood of America, and advocating violence. That's no different than Hitler.
Do you believe that we are on the verge of like a civil war if Trump is elected, or even if Trump loses the election, specifically if he loses the election?
I think if Trump loses the election, we will be on the way back to a more responsible and sane politics. I think if Trump wins the election, I can't imagine what could happen. Well, I can, but I don't know. I don't have that good a crystal ball.
Do you think that we can survive another 4 years of Donald Trump?
I don't think democracy can survive. We won't have a democracy. I mean, Trump's made that clear, and the Supreme Court has supported it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with a divided legislature, Supreme Court, it's going to take over legislating. They're already doing it. The regulatory agencies no longer make decisions. The Supreme Court is going to turn into, it has said, now we're the regulatory agency. And with Trump and the Supreme Court being on the same page and Congress in gridlock, that's a recipe for the end of democracy, no doubt about it. I really don't. Trump said, after this election, if I'm elected, we won't have to vote anymore. And people should really take that seriously, because I think that will happen.
How do the traits of a malignant narcissist manifest in Trump's behavior and his rhetoric?
Well, number one is compulsive lying, and then number two is to be the cult leader. That I am the person has all the solutions. If I was president, Ukraine and Russia would have never invaded Ukraine, because, he will use tariffs to punish all of our enemies and make America wealthy. All of those are delusional thoughts. And that's typical of a malignant narcissist.
Are there parallels that can be drawn between Trump's behavior and that of historical figures that are also diagnosed with malignant narcissism, such as Hitler, who we discussed before? Are there specific parallels that we can draw?
Well, I think Hitler's the best example. He thought he was the next thing to God, and he wanted everybody to believe it. And Trump is no different. Any autocrat, any dictator of any country, they all have the same agenda, take over the press, so only your message gets out. Put your political opponents in jail, and create anger and resentment but that divides people into smaller groups, so there's never a large movement that can oppose you. You know, Trump does all those things, and so do all the other dictators in the world now and throughout history.
It seems just insane to me that we are on the verge of electing another Hitler-type figure, given the historical narrative that surrounds Hitler. Why is there so much? I guess I don't understand the hatred that exists in this country towards our fellow citizens.
Well, you know, people are all of a sudden shocked that we're in this kind of situation. But this is not something that happened all of a sudden because Donald Trump burst upon the scene.
Right.
It's been a gradual decay of democratic values, starting with the Reagan administration. And so, you know, if you just think that in order to really understand it, you really need to understand the history of it. And instead of all of a sudden being shocked that we're in this situation, if you understand how it gradually happened, then there's not one step or one person that caused it. You know, Trump is not the cause. He is the symptom.
Symptom, yes. Yeah, no, he absolutely is a symptom. And you know, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the economic divide in the country. I mean, again, the influence of corporations over our government, the declining middle class, the state of healthcare, the state of, you know, I mean, so much is going on in our country that is not being addressed by either party, to be fair. And it seems like we have an ineffective government in its entirety at this point. And we've had that for quite some time.
Yeah. You know, in terms of the event that has the most influence recently, I would say it would be Citizens United.
Yes.
Where unlimited money can be used to promote your propaganda message. And the corporate ownership of all the major news outlets has it doesn't really promote Trump's agenda, but it fails to point out the danger of it.
Why do you think the media tends to normalize Trump's authoritarian remarks and rhetoric rather than challenging them?
Well, the example I like to give is when Trump has a rally or even a speech, he can't help it. He will tell multiple lies. I've mentioned before in the latest rally, he told 40. This is not anything new. You could watch Trump's rallies from a year ago, and he would be spewing lie after lie after lie, and the news media would take, well, let's talk about one of them. You know, and you didn't realize what the danger was, because just talking about one of them, and usually it's something like minor, you know, it's he's incoherent. He has the weave thing to justify his inability to convey a succinct thought. You know, they'll take one piece of something and criticize him on that. And it just really fails to convey the neurosis and incompetence that he represents.
Given his incompetence, how much of his policies do you think are even possible? Or do you think he's going to surround himself with people who are competent that can get this done? For instance, the authors of Project 2025.
Well, I wouldn't call them competent. I'd call them all, you know, supportive of autocracy. I guess they're incompetent in being able to articulate the steps to reach a dictatorship. But you can bet that, in the first administration, we had, military generals, congressmen. We had people that had been in positions of power, influence, and responsibility, advising Trump, and basically they got fired or they all quit. And the next time, that's not going to happen. You're not going to appoint people like that. He's already identified, thanks to Project 25 in part, to find people that are only going to agree with him and carry out his agenda. So given the staff that are all going to be sycophants, and I think that's just going to contribute to him actually being able to do what he wanted to do, but he was stopped during the first administration. But now the Supreme Court's given him immunity. It's game over.
What should Kamala Harris be doing right now to better message the threat that Donald Trump poses and to distinguish herself from both the Biden presidency, because Biden is currently underwater in the polls. I mean, I think he's currently at 30% or in the 30s. What do you think Kamala should be doing that she's not doing right now?
I'm not a political strategist. I could argue that she should emphasize her message of joy and have other people debunk Trump's lies, or she should directly start attacking Trump and at the expense of trying to articulate her policies. She should start playing Trump's game and start creating anger and resentment towards Republicans. I think maybe it's a combination of both of those. She needs to speak out forcefully about the danger of Trump, but also she needs to talk about her policies. I was in Missouri last week, surrounded by Trump lovers, and I talked to a lot of them, and I just asked them, why are you going to vote for Trump next time? And the responses were basically three things. Well, I really don't know what Kamala's policies are. Well, they could find out if they went to the website or if they listened to her, but they only watch Fox, so they don't know. They actually really don't know what her policies are. That's because our corporate media is is failing to convey that message. And the other one was what we mentioned before. I'm just so disgusted with both parties. Since I'm a Republican, I guess I'll vote for Trump. And the third one was the thing that I care about is the economy, and I think Trump would be better for the economy than Harris. And that just astounds me, because he failed on economic policy when he's president, and his proposed policies are a complete disaster. But those are the rationales that I just kept hearing over and over again, and why Trump supporters are going to vote for Trump.
How many Republicans? My father is a Republican, and he's going to vote for Trump. Now, my father is not a Trumper, right? My father has major issues with Trump. My father is voting for Trump simply because he's a Republican, and that's what Republicans do.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with him, and there's even a point where we didn't even talk for several months, because I just couldn't handle. I couldn't fathom how my father could vote for someone who I find so reprehensible.
Yeah.
Do you think that what's the division within the Republican Party? People who are simply voting for Trump because he's a Republican candidate versus people who are full-on cultists?
Well, I think that we have to point out that these days there's a three-party system. There's a Democratic Party, There's the Republican Party, and there's the MAGA Party. The MAGA Party rejects traditional Republican values. And we could go into what those values are and how they're different, but it's basically, the MAGA Party is the party of I got mine and I don't want to share it with anybody else. And
the people in MAGA, though, don't really have theirs. I mean, they're also in poverty. They also have, they face significant hardships that Trump exacerbates. I mean, Trump was just at McDonald's the other day, dishing out French fries at a drive-through.
Yeah.
And someone asked him, well, given that you've just said that you have respect for these workers that work at McDonald's, what's your position on raising the minimum wage? And of course, Trump wouldn't give an answer to that question directly. But previously, Trump has stated that he actually favors lowering the minimum wage.
Yeah.
How do these workers reconcile this?
Well, you're giving Trump supporters credit for having an analytical view of politics, and they only have a belief. They believe Trump will solve their problems. End of discussion. They're emotionally invested in Trump. They don't think he's an okay guy or anything else. They think he's a great guy. They worship him. They think he's a hero, and so they're not in the least bit interested in any analysis of his positions or understanding what Kamala is proposing and how she would be better for them. They're not into analysis. They're into believing.
Why is it dangerous for media outlets to equate Trump's falsehoods with legitimate policy debates?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, why is it dangerous for media outlets to equate Trump's falsehoods with legitimate policy debates?
With what policy debates?
Yeah.
Well, Trump doesn't really have any policies. His policies is let's put the military on the border and criminalize all of the aliens. There's no such thing as asylum. His economic policy, his tariff policy is a complete failure. And so his abortion policy is all over the map, trying to, please different groups. He doesn't have policies. He has grievances. He talks about who he hates. And so his followers like that. They're angry. They were angry before Trump first burst upon the scene, and now here's somebody who understands their anger, and right. He exploits that.
Trump is very good at messaging that anger.
Yes.
Where does that anger manifest? Does this again go back to Reagan, or what are they angry about the most, or do they even realize what they're angry about?
Well, in my book, I said that if you're going to understand how we got here, you have to understand the sociological aspects, the political aspects, the shock in the terms of a rapid change of technology, and religious orientation, and the psychological aspects. And all the writers that I'm aware of, they zero in on one of these parts, and that's a good partial explanation. But if you don't really address each one of those different perspectives, you're not going to have a full understanding of how we got here. And so on the psychological level, basically, it's my position that Trump, like his followers, had a traumatic childhood, whether it could be abusive parents, it could be the harshness of living in poverty, it could be medical catastrophe, or whatever. What they lacked is an experience of love and acceptance that would give them a sense of self-worth. And so I think that a lot of the propaganda triggers these suppressed emotions of being angry or resentful or hurt that's related to their childhood experiences.
Can you zero in on or provide some examples? Because when people hear propaganda, I think that's such a vague term for so many in this media landscape. Can you kind of highlight some examples of the propaganda that you speak of?
In my book, I have a propaganda dictionary, and I have, I think, at least 50 different propaganda words. I don't know that page is on, or I would cite them, but take some real obvious and frequent examples is the word cancel culture. First of all, nobody can explain exactly what cancel culture is, except Democrats are somehow guilty of it, trying to cancel people's culture. So that has no real meaning except a way to trigger people's anger against Democrats. Same thing with the word woke. They come up with family values. I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's a whole bunch of words. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, limited government is another one.
Yeah. Fair and balanced is one that I love. It's if China sent a nuclear bomb and wiped out Los Angeles, we could send a nuclear bomb over to China and wipe out Beijing. That's fair and balanced. So, fair and balanced basically has no meaning, and it's used to act like you're saying something objective, and you're just really promoting one opinion. Right to work, that means anti-union.
Yes.
So it's all of these words like deep state. There's no such thing as a deep state, but people are now afraid that there's some kind of deep state that's a threat to democracy, and it's just some BS that was invented by Republicans. Witch hunt. There's no witch hunt going on against Trump. Like I say, there's a whole bunch of words like that, and and then the media picks up on these words and they start using them like they're a real thing, rather than just saying that they're a substitute for the truth, and that they're really propaganda. And my favorite one is climate change. During the Bush administration, he put out a directive to all the agencies that they should quit saying global warming, because that sounds like something ominous. And anytime you want to say global warming, you should say climate change instead. And even the environmental groups adopted climate change.
I'm guilty of that as well. I'm constantly saying climate change instead of global warming. It's just kind of embedded.
I catch myself doing it too. It just shows how everybody can be brainwashed. But so it's so influential, these buzzwords that they use that are a substitute for describing something in real terms.
Right. In your book, you in the chapter, Mainstream Republicans Reject Deplorables, you start off the chapter by saying Republicans can win without pandering to their deplorable base. Is that true? I mean, do you really think that's possible? I mean, look at Liz Cheney, for instance. I mean, she was completely, for all lack of a better word, canceled simply for doing the right thing.
There's all kinds of policies that Republicans and Democrats can agree on. I wrote that's in my book too. What they are is really not coming to mind right now, but anything short of direct subsidies to the poor, which used to be called welfare. Republicans are not going to really change on that, but things like subsidizing child care and helping small businesses. There's a lot of things that Republicans could agree on if we could turn down the political rhetoric.
And how do we go about turning down the political rhetoric? Because right now it's at a fever pitch.
I think the election is going to be a turning point. This is not the first time that America has encountered an existential crisis. The Civil War was another time. McCarthyism, anti-communism crusade was another time. And now we're facing this challenge. We overcame those other challenges, and I think that the election gives us an opportunity to overcome this one.
What is your opinion as far as who's going to win the election as it stands right now? Do you really think that Kamala Harris stands a chance?
My opinion is I don't know. I wished I did. And I read the polls every day. I'm looking at the news to find out the latest poll to see who's winning and losing. And Kamala right now is slipping instead of gaining. So I'm worried. I'm very worried.
How much of it do you think is also to do with the situation in Gaza?
That has an impact, definitely. There's a lot, what Kamala says, it has to be during the election filtered through who I'm appealing to get elected. So you really just can't say what you believe. You can't advocate for a two-state solution, although I think she does support that, but she doesn't talk about it. You have to walk this really fine line of not alienating the Jewish community or the Arab community. So that's a really difficult issue to address during an election cycle.
Now, you said that you're paying attention to the polls. I'm curious because I've looked and I can't really find any information on this. As far as holding the House and the Senate, where does that stand? Is that also very much on a knife's edge?
The polling and the news reports that I see say that the Democrats are going to lose the Senate because we have so many seats. I think we have 20-some seats up, and the Republicans have 8. And a lot of those 20 seats are in the battleground states. It's going to be very, very difficult to hold the Senate.
And what about the House? Is there any chance of Democrats taking back the House?
That's also hard to predict. It's not as the outlook is not as dire as the Senate, but it's by no means easy. You can't really have any confidence in saying either one of the parties are going to win the House. It's like this presidential election. It's so close.
Do you see Trump's ambitions as reflecting those of a typical authoritarian leader?
His what? His ambition?
His ambitions, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you want to compare Trump to anybody, uh, the similarities to Hitler and other authoritarian leaders, it can't be ignored. I mean, it's so obvious.
Can you explain? And I want to go back to the malignant narcissism for a moment. Can you explain why Trump's accusations against migrants in relation to the fentanyl deaths are misleading?
In terms of fentanyl, they have technology that can detect fentanyl uh, on anyone that's crossing the border. And that was in the reform bill, immigration reform bill, that the Democrats opposed. Uh, and the border doesn't have to be something that can't be solved. The border actually, we know how to solve the problems at the border. The problem is that Trump and Republicans don't want to solve the problem at the border because that's their number one issue to campaign on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, look at Trump. I was very much against the immigration bill or the border protection bill that Democrats put forward because it was very much a right-wing policy. But even given that, Trump simply blocked that measure from taking place because he wanted to campaign on the issue of immigration.
Yeah, as a smart move on Trump's part because now everybody believes has a solution to immigration, and that's his number one issue. And it just astounds me that when you poll people and you ask them, give me the order of importance of the issues facing America, and we hear about immigration, the economy, the war in Ukraine, or foreign policy, and you look at the top five, and global warming's not one of them.
Yeah.
And that is the catastrophe of not our lifetime, of our civilization, and it's not on the list. That just shows how our media fails to tell people what's important.
Well, what impact psychologically has Trump's repeated lies had on public trust in the media and our democratic institutions?
Well, I think the big thing is that this idea that the most important thing is winning. And if you have to lie to win, then it's okay to lie.
And even use violence.
And violence, yes. Trump has hinted at, if you don't win, it's going to be violent.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think that we'll see a resurrection of January 6th on a larger scale if he should say lose the election?
That's another question I just don't know. I could argue either side of that issue, but like I say, my crystal ball is just not that good.
How does misinformation about issues like drug smuggling contribute to the political polarization that we see in this country? I mean, this kind of goes back to the fentanyl problem a little bit.
Well, it just makes people afraid of a threat that doesn't exist or is of minor importance. I'm not afraid of people coming to my community and eating my cat. And I'm not afraid of drug dealers on the corner of the street selling drugs, or all of these other bad things, murdering high school girls, and all these other things that Republicans like to make us afraid of. One thing that Republicans never want to talk about is to compare the crime rate of illegal immigrants to other, say, first generation Latinos. I worked in the Latino community for most of my career, and I can tell you one of the barriers to providing services to illegal immigrants is helping them overcome the distrust that they have of any established agency. They think that they're so worried about somebody discovering, finding information about them that would get them deported. The
Right.
last thing they would ever want to do, I tell you, 99.99% of illegal immigrants are not going to go to polls to vote. They come from countries where you are afraid of your government, and they have that fear of the United States government. All government institutions are out to find them and send them back. But the Republican narrative is they're flooding the country, and they're going to vote, they're going to cheat and impersonate a voter. That is absolutely hysterical.
Yeah. Speaking of fear, what role does fear play in the messaging of a malignant narcissist, especially in Trump's rhetoric on immigration?
Well, fear is a symptom of insecurity. And Trump says, I'm the answer. You don't have to be, there's a lot to be afraid of out there, but if I'm elected, I'm going to solve that problem.
How can the public become more discerning when it comes to recognizing propaganda from our political figures?
Well, I would say the number one thing would be read my book. I think people could be more understanding if our media would be more assertive in informing them of the threat to democracy. You don't see coverage of political events reported as a threat to democracy, that our very way of government is in danger. They don't want to ring that alarm bell, and they don't. But unless they do, democracy is going to be over. In addition to my, I've kind of gravitated from trying to promote my book, which, I still want to do, but I've discovered something that's even more important, and that is to convey this message of we must defend our democracy. So I basically have now a large Facebook following from promoting my book. And what I am encouraging people to do is to share posts with all of your Facebook friends about the threat to democracy. So a lot of my posts, I start out in captions: defend democracy, and feature comment on a news article that documents the threat to democracy. So they can go to my Facebook, they can go to their own news feed and find articles like this and share it with all of your audience. And those audience members be encouraged to share it even more, to try to get this message of we must defend our democracy out. And I just think that by repeating this message and engaging people into this campaign to enlighten people about the threat to our democracy, I can only sell so many books, but I can influence thousands of people if I can encourage them to share this message.
I want to go back to what Miriam says, the problem of Israel and Gaza, because that is an issue that is very dear and near to my heart. And it's one of the issues that I have with Kamala Harris, in that research has shown that if she would simply threaten an arms embargo against Israel, unless they end the war in Gaza, she would jump 5 points ahead in the polls. Yet the problem seems to be she has received so much money from organizations like AIPAC and it just seems like she's enabling a genocide. And that to me is a very difficult the same for me to be able to vote for her.
Well, the other calculation is how many votes would she lose if she took an aggressive stance against Israel?
I think she would gain votes.
Well, a lot of I don't know, but a lot of Jewish people support America's subsidy of the Israeli military, and I think that she is aware that the power of the Jewish lobby in America should not be underestimated.
Well,
so
and I would,
like I say,
and that part of the problem is that we have these lobbyists that hold this exponential influence over our politicians on both sides of the aisle. And I recognize that Trump is going to be even worse on this issue.
Yeah.
But it still seems like, why are politicians so invested in appeasing their lobbyists and their corporate donors that they undermine the will of the people?
That's right. Money corrupts Democrats just like it corrupts Republicans, and money determines policy most of the time more than votes determine policy.
Yeah. I want to ask you too, how does Trump's need for admiration play into his political strategy?
It supports the narrative is I'm the only one who can solve these problems. I will rescue you. I will he told women, I will be your protector.
Right.
He presents himself as the savior, the solution to everybody's problems, without really offering any kind of solution or policy whatsoever.
And can you discuss the psychological impact on a society such as the United States that is constantly exposed to misinformation from its leaders?
The thing that comes to mind when you say that is the psychology of cultism. I'm not going to name names, but there's several religious cult leaders.
It sounds like Donald Trump is coming for you right now.
Yeah, but there's a history of cult leaders manipulating entire populations in America, and Trump is just the latest.
Can you give examples of some other figures from America's history that have been similar? There's McCarthy.
There's McCarthy. There's Graham.
I'm not familiar with Graham. Who's Graham?
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. Who's Graham?
It's a religious leader. I forgot. Maybe it's not Graham. I can't remember his name. Who are some of Robertson?
Rob Paul. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but there's several. There's several mega church multimillionaires that have conned people into donating their life savings.
Yes.
Billy Graham. Thank you, whoever put that up there. Yeah. So, there's, we have our share of cult leaders in America, and Trump's the latest one.
Now, what are some of the techniques that Trump uses to maintain the loyalty of his base, despite his frequent falsehoods and lies and propaganda?
I would say the number one is resentment to create division. Be resentful of, you name it, fill in the blank. Kamala Harris, Democrats. Democrats are not the opposition party. They are the enemy of the people. A free press is the enemy of the people.
How should journalists approach
So,
interviewing or covering a leader with traits of malignant narcissism?
how should who cover?
How should journalists approach interviewing
I'm
or
sorry.
covering a leader?
Journalists. Well, one thing is they should give up telling, like pretending there's two sides to the story. You know, there's the truth, and if there's another side, it's the lies, and so they want to act like both points of view are valid, and they're not. When one side is telling you the truth and the other side is telling you propaganda, it's not fair and balanced to treat each side equally. And that's what a lot of journalism does. Instead, they miss the seriousness of the event that they're covering by coming up with some milquetoast description of it, or acting like there's two valid sides to the story.
Why do you think, and maybe I'm generalizing here, and I do apologize, why do you think empathy is absent in individuals with malignant narcissism, and how does this affect their leadership style?
It's impossible to have empathy if you're a narcissist, because narcissists don't care about anybody else. They have no empathy. They don't care what other people feel. They only care about their own feelings and their own resentment and conveying that feeling to others. There's no room for empathy in a narcissist.
And do narcissists have a distorted perception of reality?
Yes. I mean, like I said, the narcissist basically believes I got mine and I don't want to share it with you. And people who are not narcissistic and only thinking about themselves believe that there's power in community, that working together and finding solutions where both sides win is antithesis of narcissism. In foreign policy, instead of punishing our other countries with tariffs, tariff negotiations should be figuring out what's fair and what will help both sides win. But the narcissist point of view is, I win when you lose.
And how does this distorted perception of reality impact the decision-making processes of a malignant narcissist?
Well, the easy answer to that is look at Trump's policies, look at his pronouncements, look at his things that he's resentful about. Those are all symptomatic of narcissism.
Would you say that narcissists exist on the Democratic side as well?
Yeah, but there's limits on the Democratic side. They will engage in political rhetoric that colors their point of view, but they will not tell you that Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs of the residents. That's those kinds of narratives you won't find in the Democratic Party, but you will find them every day in Trump's speech.
What can be done to improve the quality of media coverage regarding political or psychological profiles of political figures?
Well, that'd be pretty hard to change that, because you'd have to take corporate ownership of a major media outlets away, and that's not going to happen. If the voters, and there's enough of them, was able to control the House and the Senate and the presidency, we might see a a change in the media. But when it's divided like this, the media is not going to tell the whole truth. When there's so much money in politics, the media is going to rake in as much money as possible. We're the only country that takes one whole year to run a presidential campaign. And the basic reason for that is the media can collect ad revenue in the hundreds of millions of dollars because the political campaign just never ends. So, it's not in their interest to support democracy or to rein in radicalism.
How has social media amplified the reach of propaganda, particularly for leaders like Donald Trump?
Well, social media all wants to tell you what you want to know, what you're interested in. They have algorithms that track your opinion and your shopping interest, what you post on Facebook, and then they will present you with things that you want or things that you already believe. Social media will not tell you, will not offer anything that's opposed to what you already believe. So it just, if you're a member of the deplorable class, you're going to get information from all the right-wing news outlets. And so the social media just radicalizes or reinforces what you already believe rather than providing some semblance of the truth.
Do you think that we need to regulate social media more?
Well, whether we should or not, is it really possible when you live in the land of the free and you have free speech? I mean, how much can you really regulate it if you support the freedom of speech? So that's a hard thing to really address. It's a complicated issue. I think that we would have a more fact-based information if we could take the money out of politics, and that would also, I think, help give us a better coverage from corporate media.
Yeah, how likely is it that we can even get rid of money in politics, given the influence that money in politics already has over our politicians?
It's not going to happen. Whoever, maybe Bernie Sanders and maybe Elizabeth Warren, but who else is talking about getting money out of politics? Right. They're both on the receiving end of all of this money. So, that's just something that's going to continue to corrupt our politics, and I don't see any way to get it out.
I want to ask, do you think that Trump's behavior has set a new precedent for future leaders, and what might be the long-term effects?
Oh yeah, there's no such thing as acting presidential anymore. That whole thing's been completely destroyed by Trump. The ethical standards are disappearing. The Supreme Court is not held to any ethical standard, and there's so much, there's so much corruption that is legitimatized and determined to be legal, but it's still corrupt.
Yeah, and it's corrupted money in politics has corrupted the entire political process on both sides of the aisle. Yes. You've got figures like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren to some extent, who, I mean, Bernie Sanders really showed what was possible in terms of grassroots financing of elections.
Yes.
He was successful in doing that. Why are other politicians so hesitant to rely on grassroots donations? Is it simply that corporate donations outweighs what you can raise in the grassroots, or are there other issues at play?
Yeah, they're addicted to those big checks, and they don't want to say anything that's going to stop the flow of that money.
Miriam is asking if you can speak more about the problem of money in politics and in the election process.
Well, Citizens United created this new standard of, we have limits on, supposedly we have limits on campaign contributions that you can directly contribute to a candidate. But then they created all of these PACs and super PACs,
Right.
which are basically, donations to political leaders. So they created this big loophole that guaranteed that money is nowhere near out of politics.
What do you think is it? And again, I think a lot of this has to do with who Kamala Harris is. But why hasn't she come out with a more populist campaign? I mean, that's really what has motivated Trump voters. Is Trump is a fake populist, but he's a populist nonetheless, even though he doesn't intend to do a damn thing that he claims that he's going to do in terms of helping people. Why hasn't Kamala come out and addressed that and countered that with a more populist approach, do you think?
Well, the extreme right and the extreme left are committed. You're not going to change their minds. So the contest is for Kamala to win as many moderate Republicans to vote for her, even though they're Republicans. And so she has to, moderate her. She needs to target her messaging to that middle part of the political spectrum.
But why not go after the Democratic base itself?
She has a Democratic base. She don't have to go after them. She don't need to invest in that. She don't need to talk to it. She needs to talk to the middle, and especially there's a lot of Republicans that reject Donald Trump, and she wants to make sure she gets them out to the voting booth.
But don't you think that she's alienating people to the left?
No, because they hate Trump so much, they're going to vote for her anyway.
So how do you explain the current polling that we're seeing, where she's down in the polls?
On the Trump side, his followers, they are going to turn out big time. They are loyal. They support him. They will all turn out to vote for him. That's not as true on the Democrat side.
Right.
So, even though what I call the MAGA party members are maybe 40% of the population, that 40% can be enough to win when you combine gerrymandering, cheating, and election interference. All of those strategies make that 40% big enough to win.
Yeah, no, Republicans are definitely going to turn out in mass. Do you think that there's anything that Donald Trump could do that would be a red line?
Well, I've thought that many times, but after the some of the outrageous things that he's said and his absolute rejection of democracy, and that didn't move the needle, I have to think there's not anything that he could say that would change any of his followers' minds.
And I just want to let listeners know once again that we're talking with David Shaw. He is the author of Deplorable Politics. If we can put that book back up, please. Propaganda for the Brainwashed. This is an absolutely brilliant book that I think everyone needs to read. I mean, it really goes through the psychological elements of what we're seeing play out today in our society. I want to ask too: is Donald Trump an isolated incident on the international stage? I mean, do we see other right-wing populists like Donald Trump who are also malignant narcissists in the international spectrum, or is Donald Trump sort of a anomaly?
No, there are others. Orban comes to mind. There's a movement in Poland of the radical right. In France, there's a radical right movement. There's movements that are boiling below the surface in a lot of countries. That in South America, there are countries that are supporting autocratic leaders. I think it's truly a worldwide phenomenon, and I think that, like many other instances, America sets the stage. If America elects Trump, I think that fuels a lot of these other right-wing movements in the world.
How do you respond to critics who argue, and this applies to psychologists in particular, who will make the statement that it's inappropriate to discuss Trump's psychological profile because it's an invasion of privacy, or it's inappropriate, or it's a violation of their ethical standards? Shouldn't they be on the front lines of this and speaking out and reminding us how dangerous Trump is?
Yeah, I think it's irresponsible for anybody who claims to have some expertise in evaluating or people's psychological behavior to say, I'm not going to comment. They can put their comments out there, and other people that believe different, they can put their comments out there, and let's just have a debate about it. Let's have a conversation about it, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, because I mean, really, what role do psychological experts have in informing the public about the traits of political figures?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Well, yeah, I was just saying, I mean, what role do psychological experts have in informing the public about the traits of political figures? Shouldn't that be a main priority? Not just for Donald Trump, but across the board.
It should be, but it's not. A lot of psychologists believe that their work is in the therapy room, not in the public sphere. And I disagree with that. I think that whether you're a psychologist, a celebrity, a athlete, these all have their constituencies, and they should be talking to those constituencies about what they believe and let people make up their own mind.
Are there any misconceptions about malignant narcissism that the public should be aware of?
The big one is that it exists. Trump is not a charismatic. Well, I guess he's charismatic. He's not a credible leader. He's a criminal. He's a liar. He's a sexist. And a narcissist. So that should be pointed out. It should be talked about. And people should be aware of his mental state.
In your book, you say that deplorables are eager to follow a leader who promises to restore meaning in their lives. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
I think I alluded to it. People look to a higher power to understand their life and give their life meaning. And one way to do that is through religion. People use religion as an ethical guidepost, and it has an important role in giving people meaning to their lives. The problem is uh, worshiping a leader, whether it be God or a political leader, it's not a big jump. It's not a big transition from believing in a religious leader to believing in a political leader. You don't question the religious leader, and that translates into not trusting, not questioning the political leader.
It's a cult then.
Yes.
And is there can these people be deprogrammed?
Well, yeah, it happens. All of the Trump appointees at the highest level of government were his loyal staff, and they got fired or they quit, and they had a change of heart. They decided, Trump is dangerous. He shouldn't be elected again. So I don't know exactly what it takes to change people's mind like that, but it does happen. I just think that more critical coverage by our news media would go a long way to enlightening people about the danger to democracy.
If Trump were to disappear, let's say dies of natural causes or what have you, will that break the cult-like spell, or will there be another figure that emerges from the ashes that will take Trump's place and win over his loyalists?
There's plenty of J.D. Vances and others just like him ready to jump into the void and fill that void.
But do you think that J.D. Vance has the charisma to be able to be as effective as Donald Trump in rallying the base?
I think he'd be more effective because he's not stupid. Yeah, he's not stupid like Trump. He's smart. He's articulate. I think he's far more dangerous than Donald Trump.
Wow, that's that's not reassuring at all.
Yeah, well, look at how radical a lot of the things he says. It's just completely turning back the clock of history by decades, into a value system that nobody really supports. But he doesn't really get the criticism that he deserves because he's such an articulate speaker.
Well, at one point, too, J.D. Vance spoke out against Trump.
Oh, yeah. Well, name somebody who didn't. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, all of them. The Speaker McCarthy, after January 6th, they were practically unanimous and say, this guy should never be president again. But, they all put their finger up, see what way the wind was blowing, and they changed their mind.
Do you think that the MAGA base is bigger than the Republican base when you distinguish between the Republican Party being two separate parties?
I think the MAGA base is bigger.
Really?
Yeah.
That is scary.
Yeah. Just consider the fact how many people in Congress have been elected by the MAGA base. In the House of Representatives, all about 5. In the Senate, it's the same thing. They're all elected by the MAGA base, not traditional Republicans. And the ones that are traditional Republicans got defeated at the polls. Liz Cheney being the big example.
Miriam is asking, the mass media is owned by a few corporate entities, and I believe at last count, about 5 corporations own just about all of the mass media in this country, from newspapers to radio to television stations to magazines. What makes you think that
it's actually 6?
6.
Yeah.
Don't we have a lot of blame to place on them for the situation in this country?
Yeah, I place they're the biggest blame. If you're going to parcel out blame, I give them the biggest part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they've profited off of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is sensationalism,
Yeah.
and it seems like sensationalism is what rules the headlines.
Right. Yes. And not only, it's not just sensationalism, but it's minimizing the danger that we face, the minimizing the seriousness of the speech that you hear. A lot of times they just report it like a matter of fact, and then they give the other side of the view. They don't really they don't really help you appreciate the seriousness of the issues that we're facing today. And that's why like climate change is not even on the top 5.
Right. Global warming.
There you go. See, yeah. I'm brainwashed.
No, I do it all the time, and I fell entrapped to that. And it's alarming to think just how easy it is to be propagandized.
Yeah. So and that's just one example. There's plenty of examples of things that people take for granted that are propaganda, and they don't even realize it. Like Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist, said, just keep repeating a lie over and over again, and it'll become the truth.
Absolutely.
And that's what, the Haitian immigrants thing is. That's why Donald Trump never quits talking about it. January 6th, the election was stolen. Repeat that every day, and that's why millions and millions of Republicans believe it.
So we're almost out of time. So I want to ask you a final question. What can readers of your book learn about the importance of distinguishing between different psychological conditions in leaders?
Well, it's. I think the big thing is just to understand what propaganda is, and to understand that it's rampant in America, and we need to identify it and condemn it rather than ignore it.
And, my good friend, authoritarian atheist, is saying, I believe Project 2025 is the biggest threat America currently faces in this election. Is the most important election of my lifetime. And I've never been more frightened for this country's future till now. That fear is justified.
I couldn't say it better. I believe that 100%.
Where do we go from here if Trump is elected? Are there strategies that we can use to overcome the worst of his impulses, or do you think it's just a futile effort at that point?
Well, yeah, I think it would depend upon whether responsible Republicans are going to cave, or they're going to finally say enough. If that group joins Democrats, I think we have a chance. But if they just go along and support the MAGA party, we're headed for fascism.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, David. I want to give you an opportunity to promote your book. Let's put the book cover back up. And if you could just kind of give a synopsis of the book and where people can find it, that would be excellent.
Sean, thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it. I just think these conversations are so meaningful.
Yes.
I appreciate the work that you put in to come up with such a wonderful description of the issues that are in my book. I think that we pretty much covered the subject matter of my book. Propaganda is every day. We are exposed to it in our media, and we need to recognize it, first of all. That's the most important thing. And then to speak out against it and advocate for policies that actually help people rather than the propaganda that divides people.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show again. It was a great pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours. I love the book. I highly recommend it to people. Let me go ahead and put the link up to your website again, deplorablepolitics.org. That's deplorablepolitics.org.
That's a place you can learn about who I am. You can learn about my efforts to defend democracy, which is, the second step after writing my book. And it has several excerpts from my book, so you can get a kind of a taste of my approach and what I have to say.
David, thanks again. And for all the audience, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock right here on citizens.am radio.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.